So Ada Lovelace Day actually was on Tuesday. We're having this kind of celebration today, and it's celebrated every second Tuesday of October, and to kind of commemorate and celebrate the achievements of women in STEM careers. Unfortunately, the gender gap is still a reality within the STEM area, and the Ada Lovelace Day is an opportunity to raise awareness and give visibility to the great women in science. And that's something that from WIN we have tried to do with all these different stories that we've been sharing over the last few weeks, and then today with our guest Emily. So I will pass it on to Jennifer, who will be introducing Emily.
Yeah, so as Carla mentioned, we're really happy to have Dr. Emily Grossman talk with us today. In case you don't know much about her, she's an internationally acclaimed science author, public speaker, and TV personality with a degree in natural sciences from Cambridge University and a PhD in cancer research. She's best known as a science expert on several TV shows and for her inspirational talks in schools, universities, and at live events. A passionate advocate for equality and diversity in science, Emily has delivered a TEDx talk on why science needs people who cry, and she was recently named the second honorary STEM ambassador alongside astronaut Tim Peake for her pioneering work in STEM education and as a role model to young people. I personally had the pleasure to hear Emily talk previously at a STEM Women event in London, and I found her talk really interesting and inspiring, so I'm super excited to hear her speak again. So with that, I'll hand over to Emily. Oh, you're on mute.
I'll try again. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me along to talk to you all today. Given the nature of the fact that this is online, as I'm sure you're all very used to by now, I will be inviting lots of interaction and people to make comments or ask questions. So please do, I'll try and scroll through the screen, but I'll also keep the chat window open. So please do drop any comments or questions in the chat box. I'll try and keep an eye on it, and perhaps Carla or Jennifer, if you can also keep an eye on it as well and point out to me if there's things going on that I'm missing. And sometimes I might sort of ask you questions and just kind of get a feel. So if you've got your videos on, you can give me a wave or something like that. So I just want to start with a question. So let me see if I can get as many of you as possible on my screen. Am I able? Oh, there we go. Brilliant. Oh, amazing. There's loads of you. Fantastic. Nice to see you all. So let me start with a question. If I was to ask you to draw, no, in fact, no, not you. If I was to go out into the streets of where you live, whether or not you're in lockdown, I guess that's a contentious issue right now. But if we were to go out onto the streets nearby where you live and just go up to a random member of the public, obviously social distancing, and ask them to draw an engineer, or more generally, draw someone who works in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. What do you think they would draw? Just a random member of the public. So you can put your hand up if you want to make a suggestion, or you've all got photos rather than real-time videos, so I can't actually see you, but you could pop ideas in the chat box. What would people draw? If they were asked to draw someone either generally in STEM or even more specifically, someone who works in your field, someone who does what you do, if they were just given the title of your profession, what would they draw? Anyone want to pop something in the chat window? Anyone? I can't actually see any live videos of anyone. I can only see photos and blank screens. So, okay, a guy at a computer. So there's two important points that Nicole, thank you very much, has made. So keep sharing things, brilliant. A guy, a man. All right, so we're getting certainly a picture here. A guy at a computer. Okay, so that's definitely something very specific, a stereotype there. A man with glasses, papers in his hands, glasses. So there's a very particular image. Keep sharing, keep sharing your ideas. So there's very particular images of this man that we're talking about who represents you who represents your field. Now, let's go a little bit further. If we were to ask people, this same person or a group of general public, what this person, this man with glasses, or, if we were talking about a scientist, maybe he'd be wearing a white coat, that's a classic stereotype as well. If we're being specific, if he was an engineer, maybe he'd be wearing a hard hat or kind of overalls. So this is the stereotype image. If we might go a bit further and say, okay, what's this man like? What's his personality like? What descriptive words could you say about this man, other than what he looks like? Crazy hair, okay. Nerdy. Any more descriptions of this man? What colour is this man's skin? He's an introvert, geeky, calm, no hair, bald. So either crazy hair or no hair at all. So yeah, ethnicity, white, probably. Sexuality, not athletic, okay, a bit weedy, a bit puny. Okay, so this is quite a powerful stereotype, right? And this is quite a challenging thing for us all, no matter who we are. Dr. Nefario from Group. Does anyone know who that is? I don't know who that is. The one that I always think of, maybe I'm showing my age, is Doc, what was his name? Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Anyone remember him? Put me a hello in the chat box if you do, to show I'm not totally alone here. But yes, a successful man, that's an important one as well. A troubled man, okay, thank you, El Jaguani, who remembers Doc Brown, thank you, yeah. Okay, so very powerful stereotype here and immensely damaging, because I'm scrolling through the gallery here and I'm looking at your faces, those of you who I can see, and I don't think there's a single person here who looks like that image. And in fact, I'm seeing a lot of diversity. And you are the people working in this field, right? And this might all just seem like a bit of fun and say, well, who cares, so what? But this actually somewhere deeply ingrained within all of us who are working in STEM professions is what somewhere in the back of our minds, we think perhaps we sort of are not trying to be like, but that's what we're up against. That's what we're up against in terms of getting into the STEM profession, in terms of staying in the STEM profession, and in terms of feeling really comfortable, at home, embraced, welcomed and invited whilst we're in a STEM profession. Because let's face it, if you look through the history books, what kids are learning at school, even still, it's changing a lot these days, but when I was at school, you look through the history books and it's all straight white men with glasses, crazy hair, Einstein. And there's very few women, there's very few people of colour, there's very few people of just all sorts of different diversity. But of course, we all know that is what STEM is like. Not only that is what STEM is like in terms of the diversity is there, but more importantly is we need that diversity. We need that diversity of background, of thought, of opinion, of experience in the world in order to have a fully rounded kind of workforce to be able to bring all the skills that STEM requires. So I'll come back to this theme on and off throughout my talk, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about my journey, how I got into STEM, the challenges that I faced, both as a woman, but also in terms of who I am and my personality and the things that have been difficult for me. Hopefully so that some of you perhaps might resonate or identify with some of the things I share. And as I'm sharing, I really invite you again to pop something in the chat box if there's something you're like, yeah, me too, I had that experience, because it's really important that we all start to know that we're not alone, that whoever we are, however privileged we are or we aren't, or however much we might feel at times that we fit in or that we're not discriminated against, all of us to some extent might have something where we felt that we don't belong or we're not good enough, or this world that we're in is just not for someone like me for whatever reason. So yeah, I'd love to invite us to invite all of you to pop a comment in the chat box if there's anything you want to even actually write something or unmute your microphone and share something about, or just to say, yep, me too, and have the courage to admit and acknowledge if that's something that you resonate with, because it's always really helpful for other people to know that we're not alone in this. So when I was growing up, my favorite word was why. I was constantly asking questions. It was like, what does this mean? How does this work? Why does this happen? I wouldn't accept anything unless someone could give me an explanation. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of you identify with, because STEM, engineering, technology is all about asking questions of the world, trying to figure stuff out, trying to understand. And I used to drive my teachers and my parents completely bonkers. But luckily, I was really supported in that. And I'm sure a lot of you were too, or you wouldn't have ended up working in such a profession. But I'm sure not all of you had an easy ride to actually be supported to be inquisitive, to be supported to inquire about the world. But yeah, luckily my parents, my teachers they tried to answer my questions, and they encouraged me to kind of to get interested in the world. And I was also very lucky because my dad is a medical scientist. And he, when I was really little, my parents divorced and I didn't see my dad very often, but when I did see him, I remember we had really wonderful time together. And I remember we always seemed to be driving together in the car. Don't know why, it probably wasn't very often, but that's what I remember. And we would have what he called theory afternoons. Now, I was 5. I didn't know what theory was, but I knew that a theory afternoon meant that we'd have a really fun time and he would tell me stories about the world. And that is what sparked my real interest in maths and science, because he would tell me stories that were related to me and how I was in the world, but I found later were actually to do with science. So I remember one time he told me that we all used to be monkeys. And I'm like, what? I used to be a monkey? And he was like, yeah. If you go back far enough in the past, your great grandparents were the same as that of a monkey. And I was like, that's amazing. So what, like, I've got like monkey cousins, can I meet them? And it wasn't until much later in school that I learned, of course, that this was the theory of evolution. And another time he told me that if we were to travel really fast, time would slow down. And for me, this wasn't science, this was just something fun, this was just something exciting. It wasn't again till much later when I was studying physics at A-level when I was 16, that I was like, oh, what he was talking about was the theory of relativity. So through these stories, I learned at a very young age that maths and science, STEM subjects were all about finding out fun things about the world. And that's what really initially got me also excited about storytelling, which is something I've now come to later in my career as a science communicator, to tell stories about science, to help people engage with maths and science from a storytelling perspective. And I'm sure that's something that all of you find as well in the work that you do, that there are places where it's about communication, where it's about what are the stories of the work that you're doing. Anyway, so I went through school and I got really into maths and science at school. And I really enjoyed school. And of course, I'm sure you can imagine, some of you might have the same experience, that didn't make it a terribly easy time for me. You know, I had some great friends, but I was also quite picked on and quite bullied for kind of wanting to do well and wanting to learn and wanting to understand. I was called a geek and a teacher's pet and a swot and a nerd and all those horrible words that we've seen in the chat box already. If you're courageous enough, do send me a little hello in the chat if you're resonating with, like, it can be really challenging coming through school and university to that extent, if you are someone who enjoys these subjects, which is ridiculous because these are fascinating, creative, exciting subjects that give us so much access to doing wonderful things in the world. But luckily, again, I was supported by my teachers and by my parents. So I kind of pushed on through and I carried on studying maths and science, and I got through to do my A-levels in maths, physics, chemistry and biology. And I was really excited about studying science, but the other thing that I loved doing was theatre. So I loved singing and dancing and performing on stage and expressing myself. So I had a bit of a problem because my teachers would say to me, as they did at that age 16, you know, what do you want to do with your life? And I'd be like, well, I want to be a scientist and I want to be an actress. And they were like, what? That doesn't make sense. You can't do both. You're going to have to choose. And I was like, I don't want to have to choose. Like, why should I have to like put myself in a box? I don't want to have to just be one thing. But at the time, and I'm sure, again, some of you have experienced this, perhaps you have other interests or other passions or other things you also love doing. At the time, I did have to make a choice. And my teachers gave me very good advice, which, again, perhaps some of you have also heard coming through the education system, which was to follow the academic path first. So to study maths, physics, biology, chemistry as well, and to keep my theatre and my singing and dancing as a hobby, which is exactly what I did. So I was really excited to get a place at Cambridge University to study natural sciences. And I went off there and I was really feeling really confident, feeling really good and feeling really excited. And one of the first things that I noticed when I got to university, oh yes, a nice comment again from Nicole, same Nicole, different Nicole? Yes, same Nicole, say maths and science versus visual arts. Yeah, that's another thing that sometimes can be seen from the outside as a conflict, but of course it's not. And that's partly what I'm wanting to share with you today, is that these things are complementary. These things can help each other and do help each other. Exactly, there are scientific actors, directors, there are so many people who are combining different areas. And in fact, again, I'll talk a bit later about the idea that actually all of these skills, these creative skills, can actually feed in to the creativity that we need to be the best we can be in STEM professions and as engineers. Because of course, engineering is a very, very creative and imaginative profession. See, one of the things that people often do, and I'm just doing a quick diversion because we've mentioned this already now, one of the stereotypes that the sort of nerdy, geeky stereotype that we talked about at the start is also often that the qualities that are required to be good at engineering, maths, technology, people often say, you know, problem solving, analysis, you know, logical thinking. Of course, that's important. But can anyone throw in the chat box some other qualities that are equally important, that are often overlooked? Visionary, exactly, really important one. Anything else? Teamwork, exactly. Out of the box thinking. Creativity, really important. Imagination. And so when I delivered my TEDx talk, which is Why Science Needs People Who Cry, empathy, serendipity, beautiful. So I framed this as what I called the 3 C's: compassion, collaboration, and creativity. And for me, that sort of sums up a lot of these other things that you've mentioned in the chat box about the other qualities that are just as important in STEM careers, as I'm sure you are all employing already in your work. Because being good and fulfilled in your work, whatever your work is, it involves compassion, it involves caring deeply about the world, about other people, having compassion for yourself so that you can be the best you can be and be kind to yourself at the same time, and caring about the work that you do. So yes, engineers cry, scientists cry. Maybe if you're doing a project and it doesn't go right, fair enough, because you care deeply about it. Compassion also can include empathy and caring about other people as well. And speaking of empathy, that brings me on to the second C, which is collaboration. So some of you mentioned it here, that working in STEM professions is also about working together. Again, people have this image of the single solo white man working in his hard hat somewhere or at his computer or in a laboratory. But STEM is not about that. STEM is about working together. It's about collaboration as much as it is about solo work. And in order to be collaborative, it really helps if we are able to empathize, if we're able to feel connected to people around us. And that for me is where this idea of emotions and having emotions, which again is not in our stereotypical image of the man in glasses behind his computer being very devoid of emotions. Actually, the more we're able to connect with our emotions, the more we're able to be authentic and fully rounded human beings. Not only are we able to be more open and honest with ourselves and allow ourselves to be calmer and more able to express ourselves, which can be really helpful in the workplace. They say that there's studies that actually show that 9 out of 10 people feel better after a good cry. So the ability to actually allow to express our emotions, to allow them out, and then from that place to then go, okay, now I'm going to concentrate on this project or this piece of work, is actually really helpful. And psychologists agree that actually the opposite, so that would be bottling up your emotions or stuffing them inside or holding them inside tight, is actually more likely to lead to stress and anxiety and depression. And none of those are going to allow us to be the best we can be in the workplace. So I think it's really important, both on a human level and in terms of what we can bring to our work, that we actually honor and celebrate the fact that we are fully rounded, emotional and analytical human beings, all of us. Men may have been socialized more to not express that side of themselves, but it doesn't mean that they are any less, I believe, and a lot of the research shows, any less emotional, sensitive, intuitive beings. It's just that it has been beaten out of a lot of men, and it's been beaten out of a lot of women, particularly who are entering in or have entered in to STEM professions. And I think this absolutely needs to change, and partly it can change through us having conversations like the one we're having now and we're going to be having in the rest of this session. So collaboration, that was the second C, is all about being able to understand others, to be able to work well with others. And the way I see it is, how can we work well with others unless we're allowing ourselves to be open to ourselves, to express our emotions, to allow us our thoughts and feelings to run freely rather than kind of holding them in. And then we're more able to connect with and understand the thoughts and feelings of others. And the third C, which a lot of you have mentioned already, is creativity. So creativity, imagination, vision, all the things you've mentioned are really important qualities. And people often say, well, what's that got to do with being sensitive and emotional? Because that's something that I keep coming back to, is this idea that in order to be the best we can be for ourselves and for our work, it's important that we express ourselves and we allow ourselves to be open and emotional if we want to. That's important here. If you don't want to, fine. But if it's something that you're holding back, I'm all for allowing that out. And the idea here is that in terms of creativity, there are actually studies that show that in order to be truly creative, it's really important that we allow our brain to oscillate between periods of intense focus and intense relaxation. And mental health professionals, all agree, and I'm sure you will know, that when we're kind of bottled up and tense and anxious, that's not a relaxed state. So in order to be truly free, to be truly creative thinkers, to be able to be visionaries, to be able to use our imagination, it's really important that we allow ourselves to feel how we feel, to let our emotions out, to get back to that state of true relaxation through sometimes expressing our feelings so that they're processed, so that they're released, then can allow us to move forwards into those magical bursts of creativity that I'm sure a lot of you have had. So going back to where I was in terms of my own journey, I didn't know any of this stuff. I really felt that my creative side, my sort of singing, dancing, musical theatre side, needed to be completely cut off, divorced from my scientific side, which is why a couple of decades later, I've ended up wanting to speak on this topic, because I know how wrong I was and how much it damaged me. So when I arrived at Cambridge to study natural sciences, the first thing I noticed is that I was one of the only girls. Now, I'd studied at an all-girls school, and I hadn't had, there were boys at the school down the road, but, my first thought upon being on a mostly male course was like, well, hey, finally, I get to hang out with a load of guys, not just girls, and it's more diversity, and that'll be fun, and I can be one of the boys, that's fine. But you see, even back then, I was thinking one of the boys, rather than I can just be me and fit in as me. So I was like, yeah, I can toughen up and be strong and be one of the boys. And to begin with, it was great. But very, very quickly, I started to lose my confidence. Now, the reason that happened, looking back, at the time, I didn't really understand what was going on. But looking back, what I can see is that what happened was that I was in an environment that was very, shall I say, macho. And that you can be in a macho environment, a sort of masculinized environment, whether it's men or women or anything in between, but it's that energy of kind of sink or swim, competitive nature, everyone kind of jostling to get the answers right. And I started to feel scared to put up my hand and ask questions in my tutorials in case I got the answers wrong. I started to feel worried that people would laugh at me or roll their eyes at me. And I started to feel really intimidated. And it seemed that the boys around me were a lot more confident than me. And they seemed to know all the right answers. Now, I say seemed because it didn't turn out that was actually true, but that's certainly how I felt. Again, if you're resonating with any of this and you're willing to even just say yes, or if you want to share anything that's coming up for you, then please do write it in the chat box. But in that environment, I just started to feel and to believe that I just wasn't good enough and that I just couldn't do physics anymore. It was particularly physics where that was going on. So I was like, yeah, I'd come out of my tutorials in tears, thinking that I just, couldn't keep up. And I decided that the only thing to do was to switch my course, to drop physics and to decide to specialize in my second year in biology. So that's what I did. And I still had to finish the year in physics as well as biology. And I had to sit the final exams. And I came out of those exams, those physics exams, in tears, thinking I got it all wrong. And the boys all came out laughing and joking. Now, I know this is gendered. I know that there's probably a lot of men here who wouldn't be like that. And I'm sure there's some women who would be. But that was my experience. And my experience was that they all came out laughing and joking, and I kind of came out thinking, oh, I'd failed everything, thinking, thank goodness I've switched to biology and I don't have to do physics anymore. Yeah, okay, for computer science, similar. Yeah, so again, very traditionally male-dominated field, or certainly one that is masculinized or has been in the past. But the crazy thing is that when the results came out, I actually did better than a lot of the boys in those physics exams. And I was shocked, because for me, that was a real turning point. Although at the time I didn't realize, it's like looking back, that was when I should have realized what was going on, but I didn't, because I just thought, oh, well, it was an easy exam or something, I didn't really give it much thought because my confidence had already gone. But of course, now looking back, what I can see happen, and what happens not just at university, but at all stages in the workplace and in people's careers, is that when we are in an environment where we feel different, we feel out of place, whether it's due to gender, whether it's due to background, social status, whatever it is, we can begin to perceive that we're not good enough or that we don't fit in, when actually the reality is that we are. Because the reality for me was that I actually did easily well enough to stay on doing physics, but by that time, I was I'd taken on this feeling of that not being true that I didn't even notice. So I carried on and did my degree in biology and had a great time, but I always look back and wonder now what would have happened if I'd had support, if I'd had a mentor or somebody who I could talk to and just say, look, I'm feeling like this, what do you think? Or if it had just been a more inclusive environment. Now, those environments happen, and those, but my challenge to all of you listening, whether you feel like you've been on the receiving end of an environment like that, or the equivalent challenging environment for you, or whether you yourself are recognizing that this is an environment that maybe you've helped to create. And there's nothing wrong, let me just say, with these sort of competitive macho sink or swim environments, nothing wrong with it. But what is challenging is that it doesn't work for everyone. So it's fine to be like that, but just be aware, if you're someone who enjoys that environment, just be aware that other people may not be thriving in that environment, that other people may thrive in a more supportive and nurturing environment. And that doesn't mean that they're not as smart, that they're not as successful, that they're not as good at what they do. It's just different personality types and different ways of being in the world. And there is some gendering around this. So again, I'm all the last to say that there's actually any inherent differences, brain differences, sex differences between men and women. It's impossible to prove because nurture is so inherent from pretty much the moment we're born. But I believe most differences are within the sexes, genders, not between. And that there's a huge, huge overlap. And that actually a lot of this differences between men and women in these environments is actually due to our social conditioning, due to the environments we've grown up in. And a lot of studies support this. A lot of studies support the idea that men and women, again, probably through conditioning, do behave differently in work environments, that men are more likely to apply for jobs if they have the word sort of competitive or powerful or successful or driven in the work description, whereas women are more likely to apply if it says like something like a nurturing environment or a team skills or a great team or something like that. So, and there's a lot of examples of this. So again, I don't want to separate into sexes because actually I think it's the opposite. What I'm trying to do is normalize the fact that we are conditioned to respond in the workplace in different ways. And both responses, I think it's important that we're more open to helping to make it a more inclusive environment, particularly those of us, and I can be sometimes like this myself, who can be on more of the competitive and more of the sink or swim, more of the sort of like, pushing everyone else out of the way persuasion. Because it doesn't help anyone, because actually, in order to be successful, we need diverse teams. We need diverse ways of thinking, diverse ideas to bring to those environments. So the other study that often comes to mind is, you might have heard of, there was a study carried out by Hewlett-Packard, which showed that, again, it's a gendered study, which showed that if there are 10 qualities in a job description that you are given in the job description to apply for a job, that you have to meet these 10 qualities, characteristics, women will only apply if they fit all 10 of the criteria. And again, massive generalization, but that was what the study showed. Men, however, will apply if they only fit 6 of the criteria on average, and will be more likely to be given the job. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is partly because there is this sense of sometimes women, due to conditioning, feeling, or due to our backgrounds, due to what we've grown up with, feeling like we're not good enough, and we can only even apply for something if we're absolutely the best, absolutely the top. And there is also a sense that we can't be honest and confident about our abilities. And I don't think either are right or wrong. I don't think it's not about right or wrong. It's not about saying, well, you shouldn't apply unless you meet all 10. And it's not about saying, well, there's something wrong with you if you think you should apply if you only meet 6. It's just about knowing that this is what goes on. So I finished my degree in biology, and I decided to go up to Manchester University to do a PhD in cancer research. And I joined a research laboratory. And this was, I guess, the 3rd time in my career where I again started to feel out of place. So I really loved science. I really enjoyed thinking about the research I was doing. But I found myself in an environment, again, that didn't really suit me. It didn't really suit the way that I learn, the way that I process information. I've couple of decades later, finally diagnosed as having high functioning autism and ADHD, which explains a lot in terms of the way that I was or wasn't supported in my research environment in terms of how I learn. I learn very experientially. I learn through through conversation. I don't learn very well through reading, and I'm not very good at learning things without writing them down, for example. So I know all of that now, but at the time I didn't know that. Plus, I felt very different because I was very into my music and my theatre, and some of them thought I was sort of a bit weird for that. And there were a lot of very focused, very competitive people in my laboratory, most of whom were women, I hasten to add. But these were women similarly who had those qualities that was, again, quite challenging for me. And again, I started to just feel that I just didn't fit in, that it wasn't for me. Now, this time, I was absolutely determined that I wanted to finish my PhD and I wanted to get to the end. So I did push on through and I finished my PhD, but I had a really, really tough time. And I found myself saying to myself things like, well, I'm just not cut out for a career in STEM. I'm not tough enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not competitive enough. I'm a bit too sensitive. I'm a bit too emotional. I was constantly bursting into tears when I got stuff wrong, or I messed up an experiment, or I wasn't getting on socially very well with people in my group. And I was just taking it all really sensitively. And I thought, again, wrongly, but that meant that I wasn't the right kind of person to be in a STEM profession. So again, for the 2nd time or 3rd time, actually, I decided to leave. This time, rather than leaving physics, when I got to the end of my PhD, I left science entirely. And I decided that I wanted to retrain as an actress and as a singer. So I went to drama school. I trained in musical theatre at Guildford School of Acting. And I spent the next 8 years working in plays and musicals across the UK. I say working, most of the time I was auditioning and out of work, and actually working part-time as a maths and science teacher in some local schools. And I had a great time doing that. But again, you know, a lot of the skills that I learned during my PhD of kind of resilience and like really sticking with it, and a lot of those were actually very relevant in my career as an actress. And like I said earlier, a lot of my creative side, my expressive side, I hadn't realized how much I could actually access that as a scientist. And in fact, it was starting to do teaching that helped me to kind of reframe that and to realize how creative maths and science was, because I'd sort of lost my love for it. I'd lost my joy for STEM. So eventually, after about 8 years, I left the acting profession. And honestly, I had a huge slump. I lost my confidence entirely because I'd got some great jobs, but mostly I was auditioning and getting knockbacks, and I kind of just started to feel like I didn't really fit in as a scientist. I didn't really fit in as an actress. I wasn't really good enough to kind of make it a sustainable career. Didn't really feel like I was cut out to be a teacher. And I just felt completely out of my depth. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the world. I didn't know who I wanted to be. And I had a bit of a breakdown. And I spent a couple of years in my early 30s just feeling really low, really confused and uncertain about what I wanted to do. And luckily, I was able to reach out and get some support. And that's the best thing really that I think I did with my life, is to start to talk about how I was feeling, to start to talk about the fact that I felt like I wasn't good enough, that I felt like I'd failed. And you know, I had support from friends and family, and I started to see a counsellor and a therapist. And slowly over time, I started to kind of really think, well, you know, what do I want to do in the world, and who do I want to be, and how am I going to be able to find a place where I can bring together the different aspects of my personality. And then eventually, after a couple of years, I was making a living as a tutoring maths and science. Then eventually an opportunity came along through a scheme that the BBC were running called BBC Expert Women. And it was in 2013, and they launched this scheme, and they were looking for women particularly who were experts in science, but also who were interested in kind of being spokespeople about science in the media. So we're interested in communication. So on paper, you would think that this was like the perfect opportunity for me, given my background. But by this point, I had so little confidence and my mental health was really poor that I just sort of hid under the duvet and was just like, well, I can't do this. But I had some quite persuasive friends who kind of basically sat me down and said, you know, you got to apply for this scheme. And what all this scheme was basically they were offering a training day at the BBC in media skills. And I was like, okay. Didn't expect in a million years to get selected to go, but I did. So the night before the training day, they sent me through the booklet of, they selected 30 women from several thousand applicants, which I was just like totally intimidated. And they sent me through the booklet, and I was reading about these women who they'd selected, who were all beautiful and highly successful scientists and physicists and engineers. And I was thinking, my God, these women are amazing. And I had so little confidence in myself. I was thinking, oh God, why am I even there? I shouldn't be going. But I went after a sleepless night. And when we got into the training room, the woman who was running the course at the BBC, she stood up in front of us and she said, right, there's 30 of you here. We've invited you all to come. But I bet every single one of you thinks you're the one who shouldn't be here. And we all sort of felt a little bit uncomfortable. And I kind of was like, how does she know? And I sort of looked around, and everybody was sort of looking around at each other and looking a bit embarrassed. And then we all started to laugh. And I was like, oh my God. And that was the moment that the penny dropped. I was like, everyone feels like this? And she was like, yes, we've invited you here today, yes, to give you a bit of media training, but mostly we've invited you to give you some confidence. Because they said, actually, this is a thing. The woman said, this is a thing. This thing that you're all feeling right now, it has a name. And of course, I'm sure you all know what the name is, the title of this talk, Imposter Syndrome. This idea that at any moment, someone's going to walk up behind you and tap you on the shoulder and go, really? I know you. I've got your number. I know you shouldn't really be here. I know that you're just snuck in the back door, or you've had a lucky break, or you fluked your way through the exams. You're going to get found out. We're going to find out that you don't really know what you're doing. Anyone identify with that feeling? Again, say a little hello in the chat box if you will. I can't see any of your videos, so I can't see if any of you will wave. Oh, thank you, Daniel. Lovely that a man, I'm assuming a man, forgive me if not, has been the first to say yes. I'm so delighted, because it's so important that we realise that this is something that affects everybody of all genders, that this isn't just women. This is something that a lot of women speak about, because women have been more socially conditioned to be allowed to say that they're feeling confident or lacking in confidence. But absolutely, this is a lot of, look how many men are saying yes, thank you for your courage, everybody who's acknowledging this. So it's so important that we start talking about this, because we're all feeling it and we're all bottling it up and we're all thinking that everybody else doesn't feel it, but everyone does. And that's what that day at the BBC taught me. You know, forget the contacts it gave me or the opportunities that came as a result, which actually were largely self-made in the sense that I went off and pursued opportunities from it and made that happen. But what that day taught me, finally, after decades of suffering with this, was that this wasn't something that I should allow to control me. This feeling was something I need to just try and push through and not allow it to stop me. So from that day, I decided, right, this sounds like a really exciting thing, talking about science in the media, or, this is something actually that I could really, really love doing. So I went up to the person running the course at the end of the training course, and I was like, right, okay, I want to do this as my job. How do I do this? And she was like, oh, well, that's not really a job. Go back to your day job. Don't call us, we'll call you. But if we do call you, please say yes. And I was like, oh, but I want to do this as a job. And they'd also told us, incidentally, that one of the other reasons that they got us there in terms of confidence is they said, just so you know, you're not alone in this. And again, forgive me, it's gendered, but that's because that's usually how it more openly manifests, but certainly it manifests in men just as much, but just fewer tend to admit it. But generally, the BBC said that if they want a STEM professional to comment on a news story, or to basically be like a talking head on a news report, an expert to comment on something, they will have to phone, if they want a woman, they will have to phone 6 women before one will say yes. Now that was 7 years ago now, so hopefully things have changed somewhat, but that's a lot. They said the other women will tend to say, oh, it's not my field. Oh, I'm not expert enough. I'm not the head of the field. I didn't win a Nobel Prize. I'm not the professor. You should ask this person. You should ask my boss. You should ask the man down the corridor. You should ask my husband. That's what most women will say historically. By the by, they said that if they want anyone to speak on a STEM subject, they will phone a man and he will always say yes, even if it's not his field. Now, again, this is an anecdote, forgive me for generalizing, but you get the point here. The point is that we tend to always feel, and meant to, that even if we are sort of able to believe in ourselves, even the tiniest bit, we certainly think that it's very confined to the exact thing that we can do. And like, oh no, I'm not good enough to step outside of that box. I'm not good enough to have a go at that thing, because that doesn't fit exactly with the thing that I know I can do. When actually, when it comes to communications, which is what this course was about and what I do, actually it's far more important that you're passionate about what you do and that you enjoy and are good at communicating about it than it is that you're the top of the field. And I'm sure that applies to a lot of you as well. I'm sure there's opportunities that you have through your work where even, if you're not academically, intellectually, or on paper the best person for the job, or for that opportunity, or for taking on that role, or running that new project, I'm sure there are many ways in which you are probably better suited to that opportunity. There's other skills you have, other creative, visionary, team working skills that are just as important and are actually probably more important than the fact that you're, top of the leaderboard in terms of your CV or your qualifications. So again, I just want us to keep bearing that in mind, because it's something that can get so overlooked in our own psyche in STEM professions. So from that day, I was like, okay, I want to, you know, this woman had said, oh, it's not really a job, you go back to your day job. And I was like, well, I don't have a day job. You know, I've been working as a tutor. It's not something I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to give this a go. And that was the power of this realization about imposter syndrome, was it gave me the confidence to go, okay, I'm just going to give it a go. If everybody feels like this, if everyone feels like they're just blagging it and just kind of lucky, then why not try? So I contacted every TV and radio company that I could find that makes science content. I contacted newspapers, museums, schools, universities, and I was like, look, I love science. I love talking about science. Can I do something? Can I work for you? I work for free to begin with. You know, what can I do? How can I get involved? I made videos of myself talking about science. I made a YouTube channel. I made a website that said Science Communicator. I went to networking events. I went to talks, and I just tried to meet people and talk to people. And it took a long, long time of plugging away, of plugging. And that's what my PhD taught me, to be honest, was that real tenacity, keeping going, keeping going, keeping going. It took years. And I'm sure some of you identify with that. You know, I really do believe that training in science, technology, engineering, whether it's a PhD or whether it's vocational training, is just, it really teaches us to just keep going, to slog it out, to just have that determination. And I just did that with my communications career. And eventually things started to open up. People were like, oh, well, if she hasn't gone away, she's still here. Okay, let's give her a chance. And eventually I got a job on Sky TV doing a chat show called Duck Quacks Don't Echo, which some of you might have seen. And actually I started to get a few opportunities to do talks in schools. You know, I was terrified the first time I went along, and I was terrible. But opportunities grew, and then I used those as opportunities to kind of meet more people. And eventually, 7 years down the line, I now make my full-time living as a science communicator. I work for myself. I'm self-employed. These days, I'm doing a lot on Zoom. But I was making a living by going into schools and universities and science festivals and giving talks on a range of sort of cutting-edge science topics, as well as diversity, and more recently about climate change and biodiversity loss. And I now also write books. I've just last summer, my baby, my kids' book, Brain Fizzing Facts, Awesome Science Questions Answered, was published by Bloomsbury Children's Book in the UK. It's just now been published in America, and I've just finished writing the follow-up. So, you know, my career's going great, and finally I'm at a place in my life where I'm happy, I'm fulfilled, and I'm doing something I love doing. But what I wanted to share with you was the challenges that have come along the way, and the constant challenges that I still feel around imposter syndrome, around feeling like that at any moment someone's going to find me out. You know, even here, I was sort of in the bath this morning, kind of getting ready, going, oh my God, what if I don't remember what I want to say? Or because I don't tend to script my talks, because I know that that's more effective, but it leads to this complete terror. You know, 5 minutes before this meeting, I was like, you know, making a cup of tea and just kind of shaking, going, oh my God, what if they all think I'm stupid, or what if they all think that I'm silly, or they don't like my talk, and it doesn't go away, is what I'm trying to say. You know, this feeling doesn't go away. And I've just been invited to give like a Christmas lecture at the Institute of Engineering and Technology, which is like one of the most prestigious things. And I am completely terrified. And I'm just like, I guess what I'm wanting to share is that, first of all, if we don't put ourselves out there and we don't keep trying to step outside the box and step outside our comfort zone, then we won't get those opportunities, and that everybody else is feeling the same. And if they're feeling like that too, and they're trying it, well, then you might as well. And that everyone else is also feeling like, well, what if actually I'm not good enough for this, or I'm not right for this? Well, that's okay too. And so I just wanted to finish before I open to questions by just sharing what led me to sort of have this complete revelation around the 3 C's and emotion, and bringing that into the work I now do as a science communicator, which was that about 5 years ago, some of you might remember, there was a story that hit the sort of international news about a Nobel Prize winning scientist, Sir Tim Hunt, who made a very clumsy comment to a room full of female scientists or female STEM workers at a conference in South Korea. And he said something along the lines of the trouble with girls in the lab is you fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, and when you criticize them, they cry. Now, this was a man in a sort of position of authority, but, you know, he said, to be fair to him, that it was sort of playful, it was meant as a joke. Okay. But I got contacted by Sky News the moment that that sort of hit the headlines, and they said to me, what do you think about this? And I was already somebody who was doing regular news interviews and for Sky at this point. And I said, oh, that's not very helpful, is it? Yeah, okay, well, you know, of course people cry, you know, women cry. In fact, we should be encouraging more men to cry. And there's nothing wrong with that. And any implication that people who cry are in any way less welcome in the lab or less competent as scientists, not that he said that, I must make that clear, but there was an implication because of his position that crying isn't sort of welcome in the laboratory, and that's something that's a problem. And because of his position of responsibility, I was like, he really ideally shouldn't have said something like that. So they invited me on to the show, and they were like, can you come on and talk about this? And I thought, well, fine, you know, at this point I hadn't really given it any thought. To me, that was just an instinctive reaction. Yeah, that just makes sense to me. And I ended up doing what turned out to be a debate rather than an interview with an infamous right-wing kind of commentator / troll called Milo Yiannopoulos, who's recently fallen from grace, but was very prolific as a Twitter troll and anti-feminist and anti a lot of things. He had famously likened rape culture to Harry Potter, saying that both were fantasy. So not a pleasant human being. And we did an infamous 7-minute interview on Sky that you can see on my YouTube channel if you're so inclined, which consisted mostly of him talking over me and not looking at me and being quite obnoxious. And I had no experience in these matters, and I just sort of stuck to my guns and just said, well, you know, some women cry, and so what? And we should encourage more men to cry, and we shouldn't be implying that crying is something bad, or it should be embraced in science. And I talked a bit about imposter syndrome. Anyway, as a result of that interview, I received the most enormous backlash on social media of sexism and trolling and misogyny, a lot of which was sort of real textbook, you know, women shouldn't be scientists, they're not clever enough, blah, 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 which was quite shocking because I never actually experienced it that directly. But the stuff that and there was a lot of personal attacks as well, which was horrific. But the stuff that really, really stuck with me and bothered me were a lot of comments that were saying there's no room for emotion in STEM, and that women shouldn't be so effing sensitive and, you know, keep crying out of the lab and all of this stuff. And there's no room for feelings. And I just thought, my God, you know, this is crazy. This idea that people hold, that yes, I had held, but I'd finally sort of matured and realized that actually can't be true. And I was like, well, this is something at least that I can perhaps speak out about. So after I'd recovered, because it was a pretty sort of traumatizing experience, and I did actually have to take a couple of months off work and to heal and to recover, and I cried a lot and processed it. And then through that crying and that emotional processing, I worked out what I wanted to do, which was to take action. So I did a lot of research and spoke to a lot of people, and ended up delivering the TEDx talk that I mentioned, Why Science Needs People Who Cry. And that's where the idea of the 3 Cs comes from. And that was kind of my piece that I wanted to put out into the world as a sort of a healing for myself as much as anything else, to say, actually, it's okay to be emotional, it's okay to be sensitive, and actually science and STEM needs that. We need people who are rounded, who have different ways of viewing the world, and who are fully authentic and open in their own humanity. And in fact, if you're someone who cries, it's not just okay to be in STEM, but STEM actually needs you. So with that, I'm going to finish speaking for this part of the talk presentation. And I'd love to invite any of you to share either any reflections on anything that I've shared, any familiarities with anything, any stories you'd like to share, or anecdotes of your own, because it's really, really helpful for people, particularly in your own industry, and even people you might already know, to start to hear each other's stories. And also, of course, you're free to ask me any questions that you would like to. If you want to ask a question, you either pop it in the chat box, or even better, if you're willing, just say me or something, or put your hand up and I'll flick through the screen, and you can ask it, sort of unmute your microphone and you can ask it in real time, or share the story.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, you guys can just unmute and ask questions directly.
Sorry, that was my landlady's dog who just tried to jump up on the table and fell off. Conk. Let's see, any hands in the air or any questions in the chat box, any comments? Stunned silence.
This is Nicole again. A question in terms of like, you know, as we saw, a lot of people have at least moments of the imposter syndrome feelings, you know. I think there's probably hardly anyone who never has it. And I'm wondering if you have any, you know, suggestions for kind of a toolbox here for when those times hit you, to sort of help yourself out of that slump, to be able to continue moving forward with, you know, what you want to do and what is important to you.
Yeah, great question. So I think for me, there's several ways. One is talking, as in talking, starting to share in this way, starting to look around within your community, outside of your community, within your inner circle, and starting to notice and be aware that other people might be feeling the same, and starting to be brave and courageous as you've just done, and start to share your own thoughts and feelings with people around you. Because I think if we can get workplaces being more open about the fact that people are feeling like this, then actually it will drop a lot of our anxiety and a lot of our feeling of isolation and feeling of actually we have to hide this and we have to kind of bottle it all up. So definitely, oh, so yeah, there's a couple of people dropping out. So Sergio, bye, and Francoise, thank you. Any recommended content? In terms of imposter syndrome, I'm not sure specific content. Recommended, let's talk about that in a moment, and perhaps Jennifer, if you've also got any suggestions of content, then we can all pop that in the box. If anyone has got any suggestions of content related to this issue, please do put it in the chat box, and perhaps Jennifer, you can collate it.
I just wanted to echo the imposter syndrome. A couple of years ago, I was the Mind the Products conference in London, and that was also put into the room. And it was amazing how many people have imposter syndrome. And apparently it's very common in STEM. And our conference was focused on product managers. And it's very common on product managers. And I don't remember the complete discussion on that, but I thought about something I learned in high school was in Greek saying, I think it was Socrates, who said that the more you know you don't know anything, right? And I think that is a little bit related to the imposter syndrome in the sense that it is also more common with people that are very knowledgeable, right? And yeah, and the more you know, the more you know you don't know of anything. And so that might have an effect on the fact that I said, well, I don't feel like knowing a lot. But you can only have that feeling when you get to that level of having enough knowledge. And so to me, this feeling of as from that time, the feeling of imposter syndrome, it's like a confirmation that, I mean, people that don't know anything, they don't have or are not good in a certain field might not have that feeling. They might feel very confident on the opposite. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, really great points. And to come back to Nicole's point, so yeah, talking about this stuff is really important. Also, whatever you can do in terms of self-care. I mean, it's a cliche, but looking after yourself, looking after your own mental health, looking after your own needs, you know, that's really, really important for us to be, you know, the most effective that we can be in our jobs. We can't just be robots. Some of us can be, fine, but most of us can't be. You know, we need to be able to take the rest that we need, to sleep well, to eat well, to exercise, you know, the basic stuff. to go for walks in nature, to listen to music, whatever it is that helps you, to kickbox, you know, whatever it is for you. But those things are very important. I mean, I've had, like I said, I had a breakdown in my early 30s, and I still struggle a lot with mental health challenges, and I have periods of breakdown still. And I've really learned the hard way that there's no point me just pushing myself to kind of try and do more and more and feel more and more like pressure, or feel more and more anxious if I'm worried about not being good enough. That actually the importance of taking time to really care for myself and to get support. You know, I still every now and again will see a counselor or a therapist to kind of, or a mentor to like bounce ideas off of, or to help me through. And I think all of those things have really helped me to really become much more confident from the inside out in who I am, in my own abilities, in what I can offer the world. And so that in itself has helped to combat the imposter syndrome, because it's a much more of a then I can kind of be in the world in a much more authentic way. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I would like to add something here. I think another interesting or useful mechanism for this could be to put yourself in the worst case scenario. In the end, this feeling that you feel is because of the expectations that people that are close to you have about you, and also the image that society gives about people in these fields, like they have to be super experts and super pros and everything. And somehow in the end you have the feeling that you have to be like that, and if you are not, you are a fraud. So put yourself in the worst case scenario. Okay, what if they find out that I'm not that kind of person? It's all right. I mean, I'm not that knowledgeable, but it's okay, because if I don't know something, I will learn about it, and that's it. If you are assuming that I'm going to be that kind of person, it's your problem. So you know, clarify that from the first moment, and yeah, assume that you are not going to know everything, but that you could learn it, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Great advice.
Hi, Emily. This is Anna. Sorry, I don't find my webcam. It's somewhere, but I don't know where.
No problem. Hi, Anna.
They can't see me. And I think also that, you know, the expectations we put on ourselves, you know, that we have things in which we are very good naturally, and there are other things in which we are not that good. So it's like just keep learning and trying and being persistent, as you said. And this is a lot, you know. It's not that we don't have to know it all, and we are not there. There will be always people who are better than us in some things, but I think that the important thing is our personality, you know, the way we communicate, with the way we relate to other people. If we are not that happy about something about ourselves, to improve it, and all these things. And I think that if you see this effort in someone, it is a lot. This is the way I see it. Thank you for the chat. It's been really good. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful sentiments there, Anna. Thank you. Really lovely.
Hey, Emily. So I have a question. This is Esther.
Esther, hi.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, for putting into words things that I personally have felt and thoughts that I have in my mind. So that was really great. Well, basically, as a part of the WIN, you already know that we have this initiative to empower women in STEM and to engage young girls in STEM, actually. Now, I was actually thinking, when you brought into attention the emotions, how important it is in STEM to show these emotions, to talk about them. As I think, well, when we had the thing last week, we already told you that in one of our offices, some of our colleagues organized Oracle for Girls, which are some workshops to engage young girls in STEM. And I was thinking, if you had any idea of, it could be good in those workshops to how we could engage all these young girls. to show their emotions. So to let them know that showing the emotions in STEM, in all these fields, is also important. I don't know, since you are an ambassador for STEM, I would like to know if you have any ideas of what's the right direction to go, because it is true that we focus on particular workshops that have to do with STEM, but I'm not sure if we really work on emotions and how emotions are in these fields when we are organizing trainings or workshops for girls. So if you have any insights on that.
So have you come across, I think they might have changed the name of it recently, but there's a resource pack through the Women in Science and Engineering campaign, the WISE campaign. They have a resource pack that used to be called People Like Me. I'm not sure what it's called. I can just have a quick look now on my browser. But they ran a resource, like a questionnaire, like a quiz that young girls can do according to what their personality is like and what they enjoy doing, not just academically, but who they are emotionally, that then can show them that there are professions within STEM that are perfectly suited to that combination of characteristics. Because what the research showed was that one of the reasons why girls often don't go, well, the main reason why girls don't go into STEM is not because they don't like STEM subjects, and it's not because they don't think they're good enough, even though obviously there is also imposter syndrome. But the main reason is because they think it's not for someone like me, that they don't see themselves in that role, that they think that someone like them with their personality or their interests is not going to fit into that world. Partly because of the stereotypes. So that's why role modeling is important, like meeting someone like yourself, meeting women who are more like them, who are working in STEM, so that they can see that they can be represented. But also this questionnaire, which I'll try and find, allows them to actually look at their different personality types, because it's been shown as well that if someone says to a young woman, a young girl, like, give me 3 words to describe yourself. Women, actually, let's have a go at this, try it for yourself. So if I said to you, all of you here, and you don't need to do this out loud, but just in your head, if I said to you, think of 3 words to describe yourself, to describe who you are. So 3 words that represent who you are. Let's say you are on, like, I don't know, a dating site or something. It doesn't have to be attractive words, but 3 words to represent you. So just for your own interest, we can just see whether or not this holds. But when this study was done, it was shown that men on the whole, and again, this is just averaging, tend to identify using nouns, using things they are. So it might be husband, father, it might be successful, it might be confident, it might be, sorry, not confident, that's a description. Things that you are, so good at football, footballer, sorry. Whereas women and girls tend to self-identify using adjectives, descriptors. So things like a team player, or kind, or determined, or organized. Make sense? And, just for those who I can see on the screen, which of you used mostly like nouns, like what you are? Any of you?
No, I couldn't think about that. I mean, about using those kind of words. I mean, you are describing yourself, so that implies adjectives for me.
Well, fair enough. So it's interesting though, right? It's interesting to notice which words you picked. So the research shows that at school, teenagers certainly, girls tended to use descriptions of themselves. I guess it's confusing because I said to describe yourself. Maybe I've not got the wording quite right. But what it showed was that for boys, it was kind of who they are, and for girls, it was what they're like. So often in STEM professions, they're advertised to young women, young people, as, this is a profession in which you can be the best, or discover things, or in terms of what you can do in the profession. Whereas young women would tend to identify with it more if it was described as the characteristics of someone in the profession. So rather than what a STEM professional does, it's more about what is a STEM professional like. So that might be something that you can take into your work, Esther, is that like the idea of like, rather than describing what engineers do or what IT professionals do, it's like, what are engineers like? Who are they? How could you describe them as people rather than as what the work involves? Somebody's found that for me. Wonderful. People like me. Great, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, how can we encourage girls to be interested in STEM? Same thing, exactly the same thing. It's about talking to them, about showing them role models, about showing them that people just like them can be happy and successful in STEM careers. They're not seeing enough people who they can identify with, so we need role models. We also need a changing of the stereotypes by talking about characteristics and qualities, and we need it being described in terms that they can relate to. So what is someone who works in STEM like, rather than what does someone who works in STEM do? And I'll see if I can find you that people like me questionnaire, but I think they've rebranded it, so I need to have a little hunt around. My skills, my life. Thank you, Nicole. That's exactly it. Yes, it's called My Skills, My Life. That's the rebranding of people like me, I believe. So yes, if you follow that link or have a navigate around the site, you should be able to find some great resources.
Anyone else? Any more questions? Oh, seems like we've maybe reached the end of the questions, but thank you very much for your time, Emily. It was very interesting. I think it's encouraging to everyone, right, to kind of realize that you're not alone in these feelings, right? That these are things that we all face, and that to some extent it might be gender related, but I think, you know, that's also a stereotype that's been tied into and the way that we've been kind of conditioned and raised by society as well. So thank you very much.
So thank you, everyone. I just want to say before you all go that if you are interested in me and what I do, I'm going to pop a link to my website in the chat box. Thanks for all your lovely comments. Thank you. People keep writing "win." That's very cool. Is that a?
It's the acronym for Women in NetSuite. So kind of the organization that has organized this.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying "win." I was like, what does that mean? So I'm going to put my website in the box in just a second. I'm also going to put my Twitter. If anyone's on Twitter or Instagram, do send a message. It often drowns out all the misogynists and all the climate deniers, which we get a lot of at the moment. So if you've enjoyed this session, do tweet about it. It really helps as well to spread the word and for more people to hear about these important themes. So do send a comment on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm on all of those. Here's my website I've just popped in, and I'll put my Twitter up. Twitter is this first one, and my Instagram is exactly the same, but with a number 1 at the end. That's my Instagram. So yeah, it's really lovely to meet you all. Please do keep in touch if you'd like to. And yeah, if you have anything in the future that you'd like my support with or help with or in any way, then just the chat will be gone as soon as the call is closed. Good point. So if people do want to note those down, then note those down now. Thank you, Vinicius. Nice. But yeah, thanks for all your lovely comments. Thanks for your resonances. It's also helped me to feel less alone when I'm speaking and people say, yep, I feel like that too. I'm like, okay, each time it helps me to feel more confident in what I'm doing. So thank you, everybody, and go out there and be inspiring and inspire more young people, and let's change the stereotype, right? Let's change the image. Anytime you do any engagement, anytime, even if it's just over your dinner table at home, or talking to the kids next door, or talking to your grandparents, or giving a talk, if you do that ever, you are always, that is so crucial, because every time you do that, you are showing people by your face, by your emotions, by your words, you are breaking down those stereotypes. So every little thing that you do, even if it's just chatting with your colleagues over the coffee table or at lunch, you know, every time you share a bit of who you really are, you're also breaking down those walls that keep us all trapped and hidden behind our own fears and insecurities. So go out there, change the face of your career, change the face of what people think who you are doing your job, and let's start talking more about our insecurities, our worries, our fears, and remember, everybody's feeling like this too. So take risks, have a go, put yourself forward, and support each other.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.